Are people who write news and columns for comic books actual journalists? And why do I seem to be so irritated at this group? Let me explain why. Hey, this is Perch, and I've gotten a comment before of, why do I seem so annoyed on a regular basis with comic news sites and the people who write for them, and kind of why I scoff at the word journalist. And it's been a case where I've had some notable feuds with one site in particular, both in quote unquote real life and under this pen name here. And I think I want to trace back. So I always when I'm upset at something, when I'm angry at someone, or when you know I feel a passionate feeling about something, I like to understand why. I think the difference between kind of anger that can lead to something positive versus just kind of frothing around rage is if you can understand why and admit to yourself why you're angry about something. Because in a lot of cases, anger is about jealousy, it's about inadequacy, it's about something that you don't have, or some fear over something else. I think a lot of the racism that goes on, the true racism, not the fake racism that people call each other online to win an argument, but actual real life racists, people who believe they are better than another person because of the color of their skin, and hate that other color as a result. Most that behavior ultimately, in most cases, stems from a feeling of kind of fear and inadequacy, and not liking something different from yourself, and just not being able to tolerate it. Usually being upset with the way your life has gone, and kind of taking it out on someone else through their race. Well, so I've examined this topic. Why am I so irritated at this? And I think it goes back to, I when I got into comics, I got in hard. I loved them. I collected them. I grabbed as much as I could, and I tried to learn more about the business and the people inside of it. And one of the things that I really liked was an old publication that you probably have never heard of, called the Comic Buyer's Guide. It was like a little newspaper newsletter kind of thing you'd get. And it had, information for collectors, but it also had kind of good stories. It had very no nonsense news items about, moves in the industry, things that were happening. And it covered a lot of kind of the personalities and how things were going in a very factual way. And it made a really nice platform for you to then go out and understand more about comics. It was good journalism. And I think that word journalism is, there's a reason why I think that word is important and should be protected, and why I think in the last decade or so that term has fallen apart. Because I think journalism, once upon a time, if you were a journalist was a job, and you had to study, and you had to get degrees, and you had to do your work, and you had to make contacts, and you had to, understand the field to get that job. It took work before you could be called a journalist. You couldn't just like show up one day and say, I'm a journalist. And then, if you did, and there were people who would go to kind of press briefings and things and say, I'm a journalist, and they hadn't done any of that work, they just show up. And those people were usually kicked out kind of forcibly. They were shunned. And, particularly, most of all, by the other journalists who were like, we worked hard. You need to, this is where I think, was the earn your badge, or, pay your dues. That's where I think that actually makes sense. I think, if you're going to put it this way, if you're going to be a doctor, right, you should go to school. You should understand kind of human anatomy. You should understand what you're studying. If you're going to be a brain surgeon, you shouldn't just show up one day and be like, you know what, I read some articles on BuzzFeed, and I kind of understand the brain. Who's to say I don't understand the brain? So therefore I'm a brain surgeon. I'm here. You can't do that. You can't just call yourself something without proper training. And I think journalism was something that took proper training. And it's funny because Lois Lane, I think, as a character, I like that character because it kind of represented the hallmark of journalism. You'd hear Lois Lane kind of with her good parts and her bad parts. Good parts, she carefully researches stories, she gets a source, she does it right. She wouldn't publish things that weren't verified. She needs to do it the right way so she maintains credibility. And on the same side, she couldn't spell, and she had all these kind of quirks about her, but she was a complete human being who was a journalist. She didn't go for shock news or shock events. You didn't see Lois Lane kind of trying to surprise somebody with kind of bait journalism in order to advance her career. You would see her kind of carefully research something and then go in the field and try and get more data to try and get her story. And she was tough and she was mean and she was a feminist, I think, in a lot of ways. And that was a complete person. By contrast, kind of the Lois Lane we have today, I've been disappointed by of the writing really in the last year, where she feels a lot more like a BuzzFeed reporter. Bendis will talk about this stuff in his book, like, oh, she got to get a source, she got to get verified, she got to blah 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 blah. But then the actions of the character are very kind of, I'm going to publish this article and see what happens. And it's like, that's today's quote unquote journalist. That's why I think. I'm covering a lot of topics here. That's why I think, the whole Gamergate thing. I like, let me see what all this is about. So I try and understand the thing. There's one point that I think gets missed, or I don't see very often in that whole controversy, fight, feud, whatever you want to call it, the mess. And that is, there's a bunch of people who showed up and got jobs on gaming websites. They didn't have, journalism degrees. They weren't kind of English majors. They didn't have any of this pre-work done. They got a job. I mean, I know a guy who works at Jimmy John's down the street, and he writes a column for IGN. And he also works at Jimmy John's because, you don't get paid much to write for IGN. And so I don't know what it means. I think people should be allowed to work. Certainly, they should be allowed to do their thing. But I struggle. I can't give this guy tons of chops as a journalist. Yeah, and I've known him for some time as a customer, and I've joked at him and stuff, and he's taken it. Uh, but I don't. I'm like, you're not a journalist. He's like, oh, I'm a journalist, all right, for IGN. I'm like, well, number one, I mean, IGN is not necessarily a credited institution of news, in the world. Um, so I don't know. I'm not sure about that. And number two, you're working at Jimmy John's. You just started college. A journalist. I mean, I guess you're writing stories, but if we're saying it that way, then we're really kind of broadening the whole. We're really stretching the envelope to a pretty crazy degree at this point. If we're going to say that's journalist, you're a journalist. This is journalism. You're writing a column. You're writing an opinion piece. You're writing kind of this stuff, but it's not the foundation of going and researching your story and getting multiple sources and not becoming biased by having a relationship with one of the people who are in the story, and just kind of those ethical guidelines. Um, these people don't do those things in comic books and games or any of these news sites online. They don't do those things, and not beating up on them. How could they? If you're working at Jimmy John's and you're trying to put yourself through college and you're writing a column for IGN on the side for some extra scratch, you're not going to have time to research a story, get multiple sources, and I mean, and why would you? You're writing a story about downloadable content in Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, what do you? So that's the problem, is that, but a lot of the fundamentals, it's like when you learn to ride a bike, right? You learn kind of the motion of how to ride a bike. You learn how to hold your body. You learn how to distribute your weight. You learn how to balance yourself so you don't tip over. There's kind of a lot of learning. And then once you've learned that, you can jump on that bike and you can ride it around really quickly and you can do what you need to do. There's a platform and a foundation for these kinds of things that is important. And once you know it and can do it, it influences your career and your job and how you write and be a journalist. And so if you don't know those fundamentals, then you're just kind of you're throwing words on a page quickly to try and meet a certain quota for articles going up on a site, and that's just a very different thing. And again, I'm not knocking the guy who's making my sandwich and writing for IGN. Good for him. He's making some extra money. I think that's cool, but that's not journalism. And I think the same thing with comic book sites. I think I miss Comic Buyer's Guide. I miss some of those early publications. It's funny because if you pick up Wizard, which was an entertainment news magazine in a lot of cases, it didn't call itself, you know, I said news. It didn't call itself necessarily news. It was like a comic magazine. I guess maybe it did call it. I don't remember. But it treated itself more as an entertainment magazine than a newspaper. And yet, if you read some of those articles, and there's usually 2 to 3 kind of articles in Wizard that would be what I would call true journalism. They're positioned differently. They were laid out, very differently in the magazine to say, like, here's a news story. Here's something we researched. Here's something we did, and this is an honest to goodness bit of information about a distributor or a publisher or how one creator went to another company and the circumstances behind that. You could tell because you'd read it and be like, oh, we're using big boy words and there's sources and there's kind of verified things here. I mean that's it was a different tone. And today you don't see any of that kind of stuff. You see very junk news from these sites. So that's why I call them NEWZ. That's why I'm irritated. So I get irritated at this stuff because I miss kind of the way it was, which is a common reason why people get mad at things. They miss what has gone by. People need to get over the past. So I understand that. That's true. But it's that we could be doing so much better, and I think that a lot of fights start because of these people. I mean, the extra little wrinkle here is, in addition to none of that training and none of that platform for getting the story right, doing it well, you also have the factor of, money is made from clicks. So if you are, if the more you pump out, the better, and the more kind of scandalous and tantalizing and inflammatory the article could be, especially if you could write it in such a way, and the sites have figured it out. I mean, Bleeding Cool has absolutely figured it out at this point, that all they have to do is kind of roll out a story, be like, oh, I think those YouTuber Comicsgate alt-right people would be mad about this. Huh? And sure enough, if somebody, I do not understand. This is where, if I could, this would never be anything I do, but you could host a little, like, invite Ethan Van Sciver and Richard Meyer and uh, the yellow guy, invite them over for a coffee, and some of these other bigger names, and say, hey, why do you guys get baited into this stuff so much? Why? Why is it that this guy over on Bleeding Cool can troll out an article where he's like, oh, bet those YouTubers going to be mad about this, and then you are mad about it? Why are you doing that? Why are you giving him that power to kind of bait you, and then you respond, and then people go over and check out his article? It's like all you're doing is you're giving him cash. You do a video, people are like, oh, I got to see this crazy thing for myself, and then they go right over to his article, and they're like, and then click, you get some ads. And I said this once online, and the response I got back was, haha, they're not getting any money from me. I use an ad blocker. It's like, okay, great, good for you. Your computer health and is virus free, and it thanks you. But still, that's not the point. The point is, why give this person attention? And I mean, and unfortunately, the answer is on the other end. Those videos make money, so everybody's making money, and I miss, I'm glad people are making money. Cool, or put another way, cool. That's great, but I liked good comics journalism. I wish it was out there somewhere. I miss Comic Buyer's Guide. I miss how you'd have some news. I miss Peter David's old "But I Digress" column. I miss the kind of this stuff that I thought it brought a lot of good things out in comics, and those things are gone now. And so that's just a shame. But I don't know, that's my feeling on comics journalism. I think It's not journalism, is the first problem, and I don't. It's not set up to be journalism. That's kind of the whole problem, and the point is that we live in a world now where the money is going to be made from kind of rapid fire clicks on kind of an online site, and there's no time. Guys making a sandwich. There's no time to be doing any any research for your story. There's just no time, and I think that's a shame. I miss it. It's just me. I miss it. You know. What about you? Do you miss this? Do you remember this? Is this before your time? Where you had, real kind of comics journalism? Is this something that you liked and saw and appreciated? Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. How do we get out of this? How do we get out of this trap of anger and rage and live in peace and harmony with each other? Let me know. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notification. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. There's what I'm thinking anyway. Thanks for listening.